Hello and welcome. You know how it is. There's a huge global event, and pretty quickly, an official story gets locked in. But what happens when that story starts to get shaky? When it doesn't just get questioned, but starts to completely fall apart?
It's a really big question, right? When new facts pop up that totally contradict the narrative we've been hearing from governments and the media, what do we do? How does the story itself change? And maybe more importantly, why do so many people seem to fight that change?
To get to the bottom of this, we're going to dive into an analysis from a Dutch talk show. They took a hard look at two major global events where the official story is now facing some pretty serious challenges.
All right, first up, let's look at a massive public health campaign. This is a case where a single scientific study came along and presented a version of events that was, well, profoundly different and deeply challenging to the original story.
So this whole challenge really kicks off with a recent peer-reviewed study out of Japan. And the scale of this thing is just, wow. It analyzed data from 18 million people. That makes it one of the biggest studies of its kind ever.
And the analysis boiled down to one pretty alarming conclusion. This is from Dr. John Campbell in his breakdown of the study. A direct and frankly unsettling correlation suggesting that the more vaccine doses a person got, the sooner they were likely to die.
Now, the experts on the talk show really drilled down on the study's design. It was peer-reviewed, it used that massive data set, and, this is crucial, it had a huge control group of unvaccinated people for comparison. And their big finding was that excess mortality, that's deaths above the normal expected rate, was only seen in the vaccinated group.
And when you look at the data they presented, it's pretty stark. For people with multiple doses, excess deaths happened more quickly. Meanwhile, the unvaccinated group, no similar spike. One of the experts on the show pointed out a specific finding. After getting a shot, a person's chance of dying was reportedly 4.5 times higher than an unvaccinated person's.
So the real question is, what do you do with information like that? For one of the doctors on the show, the conclusion was totally unambiguous. He argued that data this stark should lead to an immediate stop of the vaccination program. His words, "This product must be taken off the market."
But, this pattern of a shifting narrative isn't just about public health. The show's second example took us into the world of geopolitics and an act of sabotage, the explosion of the Nord Stream pipelines.
Let's rewind. The initial story was so fast and so certain. Back in September 2022, the pipelines blow up, and immediately the finger points straight at Russia. Any other idea, like a motion in the Dutch parliament wondering about possible U.S. involvement, was publicly shot down as nonsense. But fast forward, and now the German federal police have reportedly identified a Ukrainian commando unit as the main suspects. What a change.
I mean, just look at how dramatic that shift is. The accused party has completely changed. And those confident statements about motive, they've been replaced with a simple under investigation. The original story, for all intents and purposes, has just collapsed.
Okay, so this brings us to a really fascinating question they explored on the show. When the facts on the ground change this dramatically, why don't we hear apologies or corrections from the people who pushed the original story so hard? Why the silence?
Let's get into this. A political analyst on the program used this amazing metaphor to explain what's going on. He said to imagine public debate as a series of deep trenches. Once you've jumped into one and you've defended it with everything you've got, it becomes psychologically almost impossible to climb out and admit you were in the wrong trench the whole time.
So what's the actual science behind that resistance to climbing out of the trench? The show's psychologists pointed to two really key concepts that explain why our brains have such a hard time with new facts that challenge what we believe. First, there's a little thing called confirmation bias. It's basically our brain's natural tendency to act like a filter. We go looking for information that supports what we already think is true, and we just kind of ignore or dismiss anything that contradicts it. It helps keep us comfortable in our trench.
And when a contradictory fact does manage to get through that filter, our brain triggers something called cognitive dissonance. This is that genuine mental stress, that uncomfortable feeling we get when we're trying to hold two conflicting ideas at once. Like the official story is true, and here's a fact that proves it's false. To make that stress go away, it's just easier to reject the new fact than to rebuild your whole way of seeing the world.
And this really gets to the personal side of it. According to the psychologist, questioning a belief you hold deeply feels like you're questioning yourself, your own judgment, maybe even your own identity. And that's why admitting you were wrong can feel like such a personal defeat, and why just staying quiet becomes the much easier option.
So,
If the official sources are often slow or maybe even unwilling to adapt, where is all this new, challenging information actually coming from? The last part of the analysis looked at our changing media world.
The guests on the show made the case that independent or so-called new media platforms have become this incredible driving force. By giving a voice to different information and analysis, they basically create a public debate where there wasn't one before. And over time, as that counter-narrative gets bigger, it can actually force mainstream sources to finally cover the new developments they might have preferred to ignore.
And that leaves us with this final, really critical question. When the official stories we're told fall apart and trust starts to fade, the job of finding the truth kind of shifts onto us. It means we have to think more critically, ask more questions, and be willing to peek over the edge of our own trenches. It's a huge challenge for all of us in this information age. Thanks for tuning in.